So, good evening, and a very warm welcome to Depot, to the beautiful, to the lecture with the beautiful title, Gardener's Attitude in Landscape Architecture. We are very happy to have the Institute for Landschaftsarchitektur and the Austrian Society for Gardening, is this right? For landscape architecture, yes, here tonight. And Lili Litschke will tell you everything else. I just mentioned, hello on the live stream too. We have a live stream. The camera is over there, so you are not in the picture. But later on, when we share the microphone, you should know your voice will be heard on the stream. This is wonderful for everybody watching the stream, but if you don't want that, you can speak without microphone. So I pass the microphone to Lili, and have a great, inspiring evening.
Thank you very much, Eva, from Depot. Hello, everybody. I'm very, very pleased that you're all here. It's a very big audience tonight, so many people are looking forward to your lecture. Thank you very much for coming, Madeleine. I would, first of all, I have to do this every time because I don't know, hello in the stream as well. We don't know who has watched it before, so I will repeat my thanks to all the people who have contributed to this lecture series organization. You know, there are always a few people working in the back, in the offices, doing the graphic design, sending out invitations, doing communication, all of those kinds of things. And of course, as Eva already said, it's a collaboration between the Institute of Landscape Architecture, which I am the head of, and it's at the University of Life Sciences and Natural Resources, BOKU, Vienna, and the Austrian Association of Landscape Architects. And that brings me to one important thing, which is the goal of this series. It's a good reason why we have it in collaboration between practice and academia, because we want to, from the academia, reach out into praxis and enhance the discourse about contemporary solutions and the background of it. So this is the overall goal. We've been organizing this for, it's the 16th year now. And this year we have chosen the topic reuse, recycle and reinterpretation of landscapes and open spaces. And this is the final lecture tonight. And why do we choose a title like that? Because not only because everybody's talking about it at the time, it's been there as a topic for a long time, of course. We deal with all kinds of different scarcities, not least the scarcity of space, which is an important issue to tackle at a moment like this. And but one of the most important things is that it's not only about calculating material flows and all those kinds of things, but it's also about creating spaces which both fulfill the requirement of sustainability and the cultural aspect of it. So we see landscape architecture as a field of cultural production, and as such we are obliged and willing and eager to produce landscapes and sites which have an additional meaning to the technical solutions. Let me now introduce the office Wagon Landscaping. It's a Paris. It's an office founded in Paris and also based in Paris. It's founded by Mathieu Gontier and François Vadepied. Excuse my French, as you would say, probably. And the interesting thing is not only that, of course, they're very poetic projects. It is that you really do things from a gardener's perspective, and that means you do many things by hand. You deal a lot with the plant and the growth of plants, and that's one of the goals which you follow. And I would like to mention that you've won several prizes, of course, but one of the last ones was from that you were awarded the title of Lansin Lila Office of the Year in 2024, so that's a most recent award. And in the jury text, let me just read out a little bit of it. Wagon's work is based on minimal transformation, primarily concerned with conditions for growth and the study of soil, plant and animal dynamics. Many of those projects are quite small, that's true, but there's another line in the argument of the jury. While Wagon landscaping projects address a narrow niche of small-scale situations, the modes of attention and engagement with landscape that the practice offers is an answer to how we might rethink the approach to landscape in other typologies and other scales. So that's an interesting relation, I would think. So let me introduce Madeleine Accarain to you, our speaker of tonight. Madeleine Accarain is an architect and a landscape designer. She studied at Loki, Brussels, at the Faculty of Architecture. After studying post-industrial territories as part of your master's, you joined Tactic for an experiment or perhaps experience to develop urban planning and landscape rooted in urban dynamics. And the interesting thing for me was that we had invited one of the head of Tactic, Thierry Kanji. You can look it up in our program. That was exactly 10 years ago. But after that, Madeleine went to the École du Paysage de Versailles, and then she joined Wagon Landscaping, and she's one of the main project leaders at the studio, and I hand over the microphone. Thank you very much for coming. The floor is yours.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Lily, for the presentation. Thank you for welcoming me here in Vienna. It's always interesting to be invited in different cities. The journey has been long, but it's worth it. So I'm going to talk to you about my work at Wagon. I've been there for 4 years. I've been working alongside Mathieu and François, who founded the studio, I think 12 years ago now. So we are a small team based in Paris, in the 20th arrondissement of Paris. So we are approximately 5 to 7. So it's a small office, and it's built to remain small. The idea is not to grow every year more. The idea is to have a strong team and to build together great projects. So I'm just going to talk to you first about some work of the studios, but then I'm going to focus on different projects that we have been working on, and especially projects that we build ourselves, because I think it's very interesting in the theme of reusing, recycling, and reinterpreting the work of landscape. So as you can see, there are a lot of small-scale projects, but we also do studies on extra large-scale studies, like here in Amiens, in the north of France, where we try to elaborate a plan for the rehabilitation of a hospital. Also peri-urban parks or public spaces and squares here in Lausanne. And then here more of what we do on a daily basis. It's public gardens. Here in Paris, it's the small ceinture, petite ceinture. It's an old railway that crosses Paris, and it's now transforming into small parks. It's very interesting. You should look into it. Cultural gardens. Ici, le Jardin du Clair-Obscur in the north of France as well. Shared gardens and housing. It's something we do also a lot. But then what I'm going to talk to you about mainly, it's unsealed gardens, self-built gardens that we do. This one in Lyon and this one in Belgium. So So, as Lily said, I think Wagon has an interesting approach on landscape since it's an attitude of a gardener. So we keep producing some projects ourselves. So we go back and forth between the studio and the site. And we decide sometimes when we have new projects, small projects, we decide on site what we're going to do about it. Because sometimes it's even more interesting to build a plant on site than to build it in front of a computer. So I think it's also interesting because it's a lot of observations of the dynamics of the plants. Because in most of our projects, we have a contract of maintenance of the gardens. So we go and garden the gardens that we do during the year. So it's also interesting for me, who has been there for 4 years, to garden gardens that have been there for 10 years and to understand the dynamics and then to be able to put this knowledge into the new projects that I draw in the office. So those projects are also interesting now because of course, the reality of the restrictions on materials that we have, but also of urban planning and the scarcity of places where we can build new gardens and new housing in the city. I'm going to start with one of the projects that is, I think, well known. It's the Jardin des Joyeux in Aubervilliers. So Aubervilliers, it's a small city in the north of Paris, just on the outskirts of the city. So basically that was the parking lot before the garden. So this was in 2015, I think. This parking lot is situated in a social housing district. So on the side you have the social housing, and on the other side you have the famous city by Gayusté. It's a communist architect that has done a lot of work in the north of Paris. You can see pictures afterwards. So the problem with this parking lot was that it was becoming a rodeo space for cars at night, and it was really disturbing people living there. So the municipality decided to just destroy it, because so it wouldn't be able to use it anymore as a rodeo space. But then we could not let it be like that, because it could become a trash space. So they decided to contact Wagon, and they said, okay, we have 30,000 euros, which is not much because it's 2,000 square meters. We want to do something about it. There is no ground underneath, because as you can see, after a sort of investigation, there was a small slab of asphalt, then a compact gravel, and then again a concrete slab. So there's really no fertile soil in this area. And the thing is that there was going to be no watering, no maintenance, and no gardening. So it was pretty intense. So at that time I was not in the studio, but I understand what they did, and I'm going to try to talk to you about it. They decided to think about which plant can you plant in these kind of situations. It's a very hard situation. There is no soil, there is no water, and during the summer it's really hot. So this place, I don't know if you know about it, it's in Paris, in the Jardin des Plantes, plant garden. It's called the Alpine Garden. It's really nice. You have to go under a small bridge. It's pretty secret, but it's really nice because it shows all the plants from different mountains area, such as the Alps. And those plants have a dynamic to survive in very hard situations, very windy, very with a lot of sun, with no water. And those plants, it's also pioneering plants, they can survive in those kinds of areas. So the idea was to use the dynamics of those plants and to use a vegetation palette from those plants combined with trees, with pioneering trees such as Betula or Rustifina or things like that that would need just a bit of soil to expand and to build them into this concept. So as you can see on the On the left side, you have the Maladrerie, so the Gailloustet building. On the right side, you have the social housing district. And then the idea is to have a big open space in the middle. It's a rockery garden, so nothing is exported, and the least is important because there is no money. So you cannot export anything if you don't have any money, since the soils were polluted. So it wasn't even possible to export. So you have a sedum gravel garden on the far right side, left side. In the middle, this rockery garden, so open space. And on the right side, you have the edge, the happy edge, as you can say it. It's called the happy garden because the Maladrerie building, the area next to it, is called the happy neighborhood. So that's why I think it's a nice name. So the idea was to have really this very poor open area in the main center area, and then this very rich edge that would become richer and richer by the years. So the idea was to just open the cracks, and between the cracks, when they were very small, you just put sedums and very small perennials. And then when they are a bit bigger, you can put some bigger perennials and shrubs, and even some trees. But as you can see, there is really not even 10 centimeters on some points. So it's really, really poor. And we took 45 cubic meters of ground, of new ground, of fertile soil, because it was really important to have at least some centimeters of fertile soil to put the dynamic in place. So afterwards, the soil was put into place and the plants were planted in the cracks. That was the only time the watering came in the garden, when the plantation happened. And you can see this is a year after, that was when the plantation was started. And then the first dynamic that took place was the seedlings. There were some seedlings made on the plant, so that really started the dynamic of the garden, because it puts some green waste into place. It happened to put air in the soil, put azote in the soil, and that's the first start of the garden. And then 1 year after, you can already see that the roots in the middle, they are quite small, but they are becoming bigger and bigger. And then the perennials are starting to grow. And what I think is really interesting in this garden is that we have the contract with the municipality to go there 3 or 4 times a year only. We go the whole office for just half a day, and we garden this garden. So we've been doing that for 10 years. So every 2 to 3 months we go there and we garden together, and I think it's also a great way to see the dynamics of the garden and to understand how it's evolving. So that was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And this is the building from Gailloustet. And this is also 3 years ago. So gardening the open space. The idea is really to keep those two spaces like they were supposed to be, like a very poor soiled and open space on the left side, and then on the right side, this edge that would become richer and richer. So in the open space, the idea is really to understand first, to see. We arrive on the garden, we see what's happening, and from 1 year to another, or even from 3 months to 3 months, you have one plant that's always like taking over. 3 years ago, it was Vicia sativa, and then there was Iberis, and then Timus, and then it's always one plant that just goes over the top, and then we have to manage a bit so that it doesn't go too much everywhere. So sometimes we just take some of them out, and we also prune and rejuvenate some cushions of perennials so that they don't, so that they keep their place, and then that they don't do too much woody systems, and that they don't go over other plants. As you can see on the left, the salvia was really just expanding on each side, and the idea is really to keep each dynamic in place so that other plants can also expand, as you can see on the lavandula on the right side. So here are some pictures of us gardening. Here is in the spring. And then gardening the edge is something totally different, because here we want to bring as much green waste as we have, so that it becomes richer and richer, and that the soil becomes deeper and deeper, and that and as you can see in the following pictures, the trees are really liking it. It's they're expanding from year to year, and the idea is also to create as much waste as possible. So we're gonna also prune and reshape some of the trees. For example, the Polovnia here. Every year we cut it from the soil, and then it becomes that 4 months later. And every year we do the same, and this tree is becoming a multi-stem tree years after years, and it enriches the soil as well, and it rejuvenates every tree as well. So we do the same with the Buddleia, and with some of the other trees from the edges, and the Rus. About the other plant dynamics, for example, here you have like a fig tree and the rubus that were just growing together, but you could see that on the left side, the rubus was really starting to grow and trying to take over on the fig tree. The idea is to just put what's needed so that both of them can expand, and that both of them can continue to grow in this edge. So that's why we don't come often. It doesn't need to be every month. It's really like 3 times a year, and we all go together, and it's really happening really fast. And that's why the garden is always looking very different each time also. So of course, with the green waste and the branches, we have privileged areas for insects. Last year we saw a frog, because of course there is sometimes water is not infiltrating in the ground, so we have small areas of water. There is a hedgehog also in the area, and a lot of birds and bees. So the photo on the left side is really nice. It's in the spring. And then some of the pictures of the plants during the year. What is also interesting about this project is that it was supposed to be temporary, but it's been 12 years, because now the project is ongoing, and they're always talking about building a new social housing right there. But now the people and the neighbors, they really like the garden. It's not supposed to be open, but actually some people come and they pick some plants and they just sit there, and it's really nice. And so now they are defending the project as it was their garden. It's like, I don't think anyone's going to be able to build something on that place now. So I think you could ask a question at the end, so I'm going to go to another subject. But this is a small summary of what we planted and how much ground and earth we brought on site. So there was no exploitation, and only just 45 cubical meters of earth, 15 of gravel, and then 1,000 perennials and sedums and seedlings. Another project in the theme of reusing, I think, is Asphalt Jungle. It's a similar project, but a very different scale. Here we are in the center of Paris, in the 11th arrondissement. It's a very small, it's a social housing as well. And we entered a tender with a social landlord in the theme of refreshing the city. So the idea was this is a 200 square meters courtyard, and the idea was to refresh it without, again, exporting anything, and just working with the soil in place. So this is a small plan with the idea of just having one small tree and then the perennials and the rocky garden. So this is a schematic drawing of what we did. So the initial state is again asphalt with compact gravel, and then we cut and stripped the asphalt, this time only by hand because there was no tractor coming in because there is a door. And then we put the asphalt on the side. We decompact and prepare the planting pit. And then we are gonna produce a new soil, a techno soil, we could call it, with 1/2 of the gravel, 1/2 of new earth and ground, and then we put it back in the planting pits, but with a draining base that is made out of asphalt, so that in the base of the planting pits you have this draining base made out of asphalt, and then at the top you do the plantation, and the asphalt is also used as a mulching system because it's actually really preserving the humidity of the soil, such as mulch could do it, and as you may know that there is an ongoing research about our projects on whether or not it's polluting the soil and if it's helping or not to depollute the soil. But we don't have the answers yet, but there is an ongoing project. So cutting and stripping the asphalt. Here it was not as in the Jardin des Joyeux. Directly under the asphalt you have the compact gravel base, so no concrete slabs just under it. Decompacting and then putting the wooden limits. And then also here what was interesting is we had too much concrete, even though we put it in the draining base, and on top we used it also as a limit to enhance it and to use it as a designing object, not just as a waste. And then the plantings, and here are the pictures of the final state. Here with the Pinus mugo, it is doing really well, and the Amélanchier. And here are the pictures, and here you can see that it's also like 10,000 euros, and it's just 3 days on site. It goes really fast. We go there, the whole studio, we cut, we decompact, we do everything, and 3 days later it's done, which is interesting also for people, because sometimes those projects can be very long for the neighbors, for the people living there. And what is interesting is when they do something, when they speak about it, it's done 1 month later. And that's also what's interesting about those projects, is the temporality of it. Because on other projects we've been working on, it's 4 years, and sometimes it's also nice to have some really small projects. I can continue. On the theme of reused again. I'm gonna go to recycle afterwards. It's a last project. It's called Casdal de Romainville. Romainville is also a small city in the north of Paris, and Casdal, it's an expression in French, but I don't know if I could translate it. But anyways, this is a place in Romainville called the Vegetable Garden City. They did this very technical building to grow plants in it, which is not working really well, actually. Only the ones on the sides grow, but then on the inside, nothing is growing, only mushrooms. So there's a restaurant at the base. You can eat a lot of mushrooms, but otherwise it's not really working. But the idea is interesting, of course. And they had a lot of leftover containers, so they decided to open a new area outside on an old municipality terrain that was unused, an old trash area. So it was really polluted, so it was not possible to plant directly in the ground. The idea was to reuse some of the containers that they could not use in the building, and to make it a municipality garden open to the neighbors and to the inhabitants of the space. So again, we were there 5 days to cut and to destroy the asphalt and to make the planning, and then 3 more days of plantations. So here we can use a tractor, which is really nice because sometimes it can take a lot of time. And here we're cutting the asphalt, doing an edge, which is directly in the ground, but it's not supposed to be eaten, so it's okay. It's not going to be polluted. Well, it's going to be polluted, but not eaten. So asphalt is taken on the side, and then you can see the vegetable garden already growing. We used a lot of also the compost of the mushrooms to enrich the soil that we were putting on. And then that's us at the end of the first week of the works. And at the back, you can see there's an area where we put some fruit trees because the soil was not polluted there. At the beginning of each project, we try to do investigations of the soil to see if they are polluted or not. And sometimes you have an area which is not polluted and another which is. So there it was not. So we could plant some fruit trees at the back. This is the garden now. So the edge is starting to grow. Vegetable garden as well. And there's a chicken area at the back with some tables for the inhabitants. So that was more on the reuse kind of theme. Now I'm going to speak about the recycles. I mean, it's always recycling, reusing in all of our projects, but I think here it's interesting. Aglier's garden is still alive. It's a garden, it's a temporary garden that took place in the north of Italy. It's a tender on a competition called Ripensare il paesaggio, and which the idea of the project was to, to enhance the waste of our cities, to really take a look on what we do waste as cities, as the demolition works, and to make it as a resource to do a new and contemporary garden. So Still Alive is supposed to be a very lively and a lush space based on what we don't use from the demolition sites. So it's again a rockery garden. So here the idea is really to recolonize the rockery, the city rubbish, and to reclaim the rights of the rubbish over what of the nature over what humans have built and what they discard. So we have a concept of 2 circles, responding to the historical perspective of the area, because you have the castle, you're going to see it in the other pictures. You have the castle, and then you have a fountain which is in a circle shape. So the idea is to have the rockery garden that I just talked to you about, and then the prairie garden with a large circle left unmown to also showcase the flowering and the importance of biodiversity in the contemporary gardens. So here you can see the 3 circles: fountain, rockery garden, and the unmown circle here in the front. So the construction waste were from a nearby construction collection center. It's amazing how when we do every project, there is always a nearby waste collection center. There are so much that you can always find some. And what is interesting is also that you can really see what it is. For example, here it's pretty precise. And that's what we wanted to showcase also in this project. So the idea was to really enhance the beauty of these materials, to make it a lush garden, and to try to understand why why we do so much waste and how we can reintroduce them in the city today. So here it's also a project that we build ourselves with perennial plants and pioneering plants. And here is the project at the end, with water to attract the birds. So another project in the same kind of idea that we did very recently, I think it was 2 months ago in October, yes. It was in Paris this time, and it was in front of a station. People, the municipality and the cultural center wanted to attract people's attention on the waste of the city, so that's why they called us. And again, another tractor of waste came by, and we worked on it and did 3 circles, also to manage the flux between the station and the park, and to also it's in the idea of attracting people's attention on the minerality of the city. So here we did the work in 4 days. And what's interesting also here and in other projects is that we work with schools that are in the area. Here it's a horticultural school that came with us for the plantation, and it's really interesting also to exchange with them and to let them know how it works. It was raining a lot, so here you go at the end. On another subject, reinterpretation, I'm going to talk to you about a very special project that I've been working on for 4 years now. It's the 13th of November 2015 garden. It's not exactly the same because it's bigger, and we do not build it ourselves. So as you may know, there were attacks in 2015 in Paris. They took place in 6 different places, mainly in the 10th and 11th arrondissement of Paris, but also in the Stade de France in Saint-Denis. So we entered the competition with the idea of the associations of victims that came together after the attacks was not to have a normal, like a mineral memorial, but a garden. They wanted a garden in the city that would be opened 24/7, so that everyone could come and just pass by, and that would also live, and would change every year, and would be a place of hope and a place of life. They decided to put it just behind the Hôtel de Ville. On the right side you have Notre Dame, and here it's the Hôtel de Ville, and just behind you have a church. It's called l'Église Saint-Gervais, and it's the square that's just in front of it. They chose this place because it's not one of the places of the attacks, because there were 6 places, so they could not choose one. And they decided to put it here because it's just in the middle of Paris, also in front of a state building, and there is an elm on the place, which is called the Justice Elm, and it was there since the medieval times. Well, it's not the same elm, but there was an elm, and they did justice underneath it. So they chose it, I think, for the idea of it. So our project on that night, the geography of Paris for the people living on the attacks was completely blurred. Everyone was running away from the attacks. Everyone took shelters in other people's apartments. Everyone was just, it was very confusing. So the idea was to recreate, to project the maps of the 6 neighborhoods of the locations of the attack, and to reinterpret these maps in this place, in this new garden that will emerge from the ground. So the fragmented stone will serve as a reminder of this violence that took place that night, and the garden will be a tribute to life. The idea was to work with the stone of Paris, which is a granite. The granite, you can see it all over Paris. It's on the floor, it's everywhere. The idea was to really work with this stone from the blocks where the names of the victims would be written until the slabs, the pavers, and then the rockery garden. To really have the idea of this geographical place that would emerge from the ground and then become a garden, from the violence to the peace of the garden in the middle. So this is the plan that emerged from a lot of thinking about how can we put these neighborhoods into a map, a plan that would work also as a garden that is open 24/7, because you must know that in Paris there are no gardens that are open during the night. There's just a Jardin de la Villette, but it's a huge park, and it's not it's the only one that's going to be opened. So it was the question of, it must be a public space, but it must also be a memory place and a garden. So how can we manage this? It's the idea is to represent the building places of the plans with the rocks and the gardens, and that the alleys would be representations of the streets. Of course, everything has been reshaped so that everyone can go through, so that we keep a distance from the trees that are already existing, etc. So we could actually describe this project in 4 layers. So the first one is, of course, the urban base, because it's already existing. There are trees existing. These are very typical buildings and heritage buildings around it, with the church and the Hôtel de Ville in front. And you have to keep the passages from the place and to the church. And then the second one is an enclosure of stones, what I was talking about. And then a place of memory, of course, of commemoration. It must be a place of commemoration once a year, every 15th of November, but also for everyday use, so that people that were close to the victims can come and just sit and be able to commemorate. And then a glade garden in the middle to represent the peace, and to have this quite full area in the middle. So about the urban base, as I told you, we keep the daily uses in place with the passages on both sides, and the benches that people can just use the place as it was before, but facing something much more interesting, because it was a parking lot before. The enhancement of perspective with the elm that I was talking to you about on the left side, and on the right side. And on the left side there is an olive tree that has been given by the city of Paris to the victims. The pedestrian crossings, and of course 2 squares that are being built in front of the church and in front of the Hôtel de Ville to be able to commemorate. The enclosure stone is being built in granite. It was chosen every step of the way. We had discussions with the associations of victims to understand what they wanted, because that's their project also. And they came with us to choose this stone, which is a blue granite from the Brittany. And the idea is really to have these stones with the name of the victims, the benches facing it, and then the stone that is degrading itself and becoming the garden in the middle. The work of the stone is really an interesting work, because it's not very often that we work with such big stones and such also a material that is very hard, but also very interesting, because we have to work with people that are experts in their profession. So here are the quarries and the proceedings of how we are going to manage this stone limits. For example, here is the Bataclan stone. It's a stele, and the names are going to be written in it. There is a lot of constraints about also the weight of each element, because we are on a parking lot. There's a parking lot in the basement. I should have told you before. That's why also we don't plant trees here, and that's why we have to cut these stones into several pieces so that it's not too heavy to be supported by the ground. So now we are building it. Finally, it's gonna be ended in March or April. If you go to Paris, you're gonna be able to see it. So every step of the way, it's a very delicate business. And I'm gonna talk to you about these water ponds after. The third theme. Third layer is the place of memories, I told you. Of course, the names of the victims should be there. How can we write them? How do we put them in this stone? How can they be touched? How can they be lightened during the night? These are all very interesting questions that we try to respond with lighting engineers, designers, graphic designers, the associations of victims, the city of Paris. So all we try to understand how can we manage to work with this very heavy stone, and how do the people decide where the names should be written, in what kind of composition, and so on. So as you can see now, the first engravings have been made. And fourth, the layer of the garden. This is a very enclosed space, because as I told you, you have the church, you have the buildings, you have the already existing platanus, and then it's not very sunny. So we try to understand where the sun is, where can we plant which kind of plants, and as you can see here on the bottom of the place, it's always in the shadow. So we try to do a vegetation palette that was going according to this sun and shade, and we have this area in the middle, which is dedicated to a perennial prairie garden that is connecting the two trees between the elm and the olive tree. And that is supposed to be very open to let the perspective also being able to see. These are the rocky gardens. So as I told you, going from the stairs where the names of the victims are written until these rocky gardens. And then there is an interesting feature. We worked alongside Gilles Clément on the project. He was the artist of the groupment that we made to apply on the tender. And what we decided together is that if it's supposed to be a place of life, how can we attract birds so that they represent, I think they are able to represent life more than anything. So how can we attract them in such a small space in this city, which is very dense? So we try to understand which birds are able to come here in Paris, in this area. So we worked with the ecological bureau, and he told us there are possibly 9 sort of species of birds that could come here. So how can we manage to feed them, to give them space to live, to give them space to wash themselves, to have water? So first of all, we try to do this bird bath for the birds in the stone limit. And then we try to understand, okay, so the blackbird, what's his dynamic, and how can we welcome him in this garden? So, for example, he loves to go from the ground in very small bounds, and tries to look at worms, and so how can we bring the worms? Which kind of shrubs and small trees can we manage to have in the area, such as prunus, amélanchier, and stuff like this, to attract them? And the same with the red throat. the red rose has its house in the basis of the platanus, and it's going to come here like very straightforward from its place to live to the ground. So we need to have an open area in the middle because he has to see where he's going. And then the jet, he's more like passing through, but it's very interesting with this bird. It's taking the nuts from the quercus, and he's hiding them between the seasons, and then he's gonna come back. And so we need to find places where he could hide his nuts, and then come back later to catch it. So we try to understand. We don't know if it's gonna work, but at least it's in project. So we did it with the other birds as well. Of course, a very interesting element is also the lightning, because as I told you, it's supposed to be open during the night. So we worked with the lighting engineer, and the idea is really to have those peripheral lighting system, which are like normal use in the city, and then in the middle you have more of a commemoration space with the lights that are supposed to look like a bit like candles, and they are placed on the celestial. I don't know how you call it in English, but this of the night of the attacks. This project was a really one-of-a-kind project for the city in terms of stone architecture, in terms of also of planting, because they never planted the plants that we try to plant there. In terms also of lighting, so they proposed, we asked to a prototypal garden, scale 1:1, to try and see how it's going to grow also. So this prototypal garden was based in l'École du Breuil, which is a school of horticulture near Paris. And we tried everything in this garden, but mostly we tried the stone arrangements and the plants, and it stayed on for 1.5 years. So we just have 1.5 years, but at least we could understand what the dynamics were, and we changed some things according to what we saw. So here is us planting. It's 80 square meters. And again, this is at the beginning. We could also try to write the names and see with the associations if it was according to their wishes. Also, the lighting was very important to dim and to understand if it's far enough from the stone and stuff like that. This is the lighting system as candles during the nights. Now it's 1 year later. So as you can see, it's growing really fast. And we adapted the vegetation palette to match we are always talking with the gardeners of the city of Paris to understand if it's okay for them to manage these kind of spaces, if they're going to be able, if they know the plants in advance, because if they know the plants, it's going to be much easier for them to work with them later. So we work with them, and they came to plant with us also, so that they understand the dynamic afterwards. Maybe a last one, I don't know if... a last one on reinterpretation. It's also a smaller garden that we made. It's in the south of Paris this time. It's Simon's garden. It's a large-scale project of rehabilitation and reconstruction of part of Paris, which is now available with the metro, the subway. So it's becoming really really interesting for people to go there. And you can see a small house in the middle. This is where we did our project. It's the idea of having a communal space in this area, and to also have a place where it wouldn't change. It's a communal space. It's going to be a communal garden in the end, and it's the first project that they do there to try and start the dynamic of the new neighborhood. So that's the place. So in here you have associations, and here you have also meetings and lectures and yoga classes and stuff. This was the garden, and the idea was to, here it's not about an unsealing project, but it's really about, okay, we are the first project, we are a very small project of a whole area, so how can we start the dynamic of planting, also of having a small plant library for the future area. And this is us planting this area and trying to have a communal space also here. So this was during the works, also a work of 5 days and then 3 days of plantings with the whole studio. So it's supposed to be also a plant nursery for the district. It's always a bit, I think, very ideological to have this kind of nursery, but I think actually it's kind of working for the perennials. They're growing really well, and they can be used further for the gardens that are supposed to be built in the next few years. Here is the project from above. And now we also have a contract to maintain it, so we go there every 2 to 3 months to see how it grows. And as you can see, it's really being used by the inhabitants and the neighbors. So it's also a very nice project. Here you go.
Thank you so much, Madeleine, for this insight into your work. It's very interesting that you collaborate with so many different people. And as we said before, now is the time for questions, but I'll ask the first one. And I'll hand over the microphone for anyone who would like to add another one. What I've found really interesting is the collaboration between the gardeners of Paris and you. So, I mean, Paris must have a lot of gardeners. How do you choose them, or how are they? How do they decide who is working with you? Are you choosy, or are you?
No, they are divided by districts. So it's a center district that these people are going to work with us. So we know it from the beginning, but of course it's changing, it's moving. Some people go in another district, but we know since the beginning that it's going to be them because it's their area, and also they have their place, their local, just two streets further, so it's really practical for them to go there on the project. But for the prototypal garden, they had to come all over to the École du Breuil to understand how it's going to work.
Do they like that?
To work with us? Actually, yes, because in other projects they're never invited to understand what the project is going to be, and they're never invited in the designing of the project. When we came, at the beginning they were not very open because they thought that we're gonna just tell them what to do, but we were there also to ask questions. How do you manage? How much time are you gonna come? What is your material? Everything like that. So they understood that it was something that we could work together, and so actually now we have a good relation with them. Yes.
And there's, of course, another question about, I mean, I found it really interesting that you collaborated with Gilles Clément on your memorial site, because in the first project already, you know, the treatment of the vegetation in those 3-4 times when you go there, do you have a plan for that, or is it just a decision on site? And is there some perspective of what you want to achieve?
What
like
we want to achieve on the Jardin des Joyeux is really to have this open space and this closed space, the edge and the open space. That's the only thing we try to manage. We try to understand the dynamics when we go there. Oh my God, there is so much vicia, or this plant is not going so well, or whatever. But we are never going to stop a dynamic if it's not. Well, it's not because we planned it. We planned it. I don't know how to call it. We planned it like this. It's not what we try to have 10 years later. That's not what we want. It's exactly like Gilles Clément says. It's like, okay, we understand the dynamic that it's going to, so we're going to accompany this dynamic, but we're not going to try to stop it. It's
but would you say that you have a spatial goal? Because you said you have a dense edge and an open middle or something? So the spatial idea is there.
The spatial idea, yeah. Just the spatial idea, the idea of having this open space with the trees in the middle and then the edge. But then other than that, no, it can grow as it wants to grow.
Does anybody else have a question? Or would like to comment?
Yeah, the back, I think.
I have a question. I was very impressed about your interests of development of plants in a very hard urban structure and all that. My question is, do you also have interest about soil, urban soil, how to develop urban soil? Because I think this is also a very important question that is now beginning to come more and more.
Yes, of course, the soil, I didn't speak a lot about it, but it's really a topic that we try to focus on in the studio is the soils of the city are unfertile now. But they are supposed to become sponges. They are supposed to welcome the new vegetation and stuff. So how can we manage to fertilize the soils without exporting and importing, as I said? And that's also the work that we're doing in research about the evolution of that soil on the Jardin des Joyeux, is to understand if what we do there, just bringing a little bit of soil and a little bit of mushroom, how is it evolving? So I don't have the answers right now, but of course we are doing that on every project, just having a first view on what is there, managing to put technosoil in place with the reusing of the asphalt and what is in place, just adding some plants, and then a few years later trying to understand how it's growing and how it's changing. Is it becoming more fertile? Is it becoming more like a draining system? That's really something we try to understand in every project that we do. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And first of all, thanks for the inspiring talk. Second of all, I'd like to build on that question on soil. You mentioned in connection to the agriculture urbain, the question of soil pollution, and that you look at how the soil actually is polluted in separate areas of each site. Do you send that into a lab, or do you have the resources to do that yourself as an office?
No,
you're not self-sufficient in that?
No, we're not self-sufficient. It's not that complicated. It's like you can send it and have it's like a blood sample, but you do it with the ground, and so we do it in every project in 4 to 5 areas. And we do it also for the asphalt, because sometimes there can be asbestos in the asphalt, so we have to know before doing the works. Sometimes there was, but we still did it. I mean, it's something that we could not have inside of our lab, our studio, but the lab is not. It's really easy to receive the results. But what is more interesting is how can we read the results and what can we do with the results? Because a lot of people that we ask about that are like practice in soil practice and stuff like that. They just say, okay, it's polluted. You just put 30 centimeters of new topsoil, and it's gonna be okay. It's just put a geotextile, and it's okay. But that's not the idea. We don't want to bring too much soil. So how can we enhance the soil that is there without this practice, this kind of work?
And thank you very much for the talk as well. And to follow up on this question as well, and on what you were just explaining with the soil, are you then also choosing your vegetation on that, the vegetation that you're introducing on the soil? So, for example, are you then introducing Fabaceae where you see, well, you need like mycorrhiza in order to kind of get the nitrogen cycle started and all of that?
Yes, of course. But in the Jardin des Joyeux, we didn't want to have Fabaceae because we wanted to keep it very poor. So do not bring azote in the ground. But of course, we try to understand if it's more argillous or if it's more acid or basic, and we do not plant anything if it's not fitted to the ground. So that's why we also do it. It's not only for the pollution, but also for the plants that are going to grow on it. And sometimes in one area, since the urban soils are just imported soils, you have very different soils in each area. So sometimes we have to, during the works, to adapt the plantation palette, because when you do an investigation on 4 points, you could have like actually 10 sorts of soils. So how can you manage 10? That's what's interesting about also not going too far into the work on the computer and trying to adapt when we're on site. Sometimes we see that we have too much plants, or that the soil is really not. It's not okay to. We're not able to remove it because there is a slab of concrete. So how do we adapt? It's always adaptation between the work on the computer and the work on site.
Yeah, thank you very much for your very poetic gardens. I really do love them. And I would also be interested into the pre-election of your plants, because as I saw now, there are so different kind of typuses, but you as well choose a lot of neophytic plants where we do know that they might be not fit to any location, but especially interested into if there is a great pre-election before, when you say, okay, you're going to think it's going to happen like that, or the soil is going to be like that, the shady and sunny areas, as you showed at the Hotel de Ville area in Paris. How do you choose the plants? You take what you get for the amount of money, or is it sometimes you say, okay, that's an authentic vegetation you do have in that area, and you try to select seeds like that? Thank you.
It's sometimes we have to have like 70% of indigenous plants. So that's what we do, and then the 30% left, we put the plants that would go right there. But what I think is interesting also about the work that we do with the gardening is that we can see the evolution of the plants in different locations. We have the 4 projects that I told you about that we did ourselves and that we maintain. The Jardin des Joyeux, we had a lot of plants in the beginning, and then some of them just disappeared and some of them just grew better. And we have a following of this. We try to have an inventory of the plants and try to understand how they grow. So that's a first basis for us to choose the plants from these kinds of soils and areas. But for the Hotel de Ville and the garden, it's a bit different, because it's as I told you, it's very shadow. It's in the shadow, and also it's going to be a public space. There's a lot of attention from the mayor and stuff like that. So for this, for example, we also ourselves all have a garden that we garden, private gardens, and we all have some plants that we know, and that we know how they live, in what soil they are able to survive and stuff like that. So I think it's always a bit of what we have in the project that have worked well in this kind of area, what we know from our private gardens, what we know from also other public gardens around us, because Paris is also full of small gardens that are working really well, and other projects. So I think it's an inventory that we made over the years, and that we try to also, we try to investigate new plants every year, because the ones that were there 10 years ago, maybe sometimes they don't apply anymore, and in 20 years it's not going to be the trees that we planted 10 years ago as well. So it's always putting up to to the page. So I hope it answers. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for answering the questions. I guess you said a lot about your projects already in your presentation. That's why perhaps the very practical questions were still open. I would like to thank you very, very much for sharing your experiences and the one of your office in Paris with us. And I would like to thank all of you for coming. This was the last lecture of this series this year. Next year we will have a different topic, perhaps. Perhaps we will follow up on this because it's a good one. We don't know yet. Well, so thanks a lot, and we will have a drink now, and perhaps somebody can approach you if you're still here.
Yeah, I will stay there.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.